As part of Unity Houston's month-long celebration of Black History Month, it is my honor to share some information about an African-American figure who was not so familiar to me. The Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray was an attorney, author, priest, and a brilliant legal architect of the civil rights and women's movements. Though not widely known for these contributions, she was a figure of searing intellect and trailblazing instinct before her time. Anna Pauline Murray was born in Baltimore in 1910. Her family was, in her words, a United Nations in miniature, including enslaved and free Black people, Native Americans, slave-holding whites, and Irish immigrants. Tragically, at the age of 3, her mother suddenly died of a brain hemorrhage, and her grieving father sent her and 5 siblings to live with her maternal family in Durham, North Carolina. She taught herself to read by age 5, and by the time she graduated 11th grade at age 15, she was the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, the president of the Literary Society, class secretary, member of the debate team, a top student, and a forward on the basketball team. To escape from the Jim Crow South, she set her sights on Columbia University in New York City. However, since Columbia did not accept women as students at the time, she attended Hunter College. She moved into a room in Harlem and found herself in the heady atmosphere of the Harlem Renaissance, surrounded by figures like Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, and Mary Bethune. She graduated at the height of the Depression, returned to North Carolina, and in the following years she took part in early nonviolent protests challenging segregation and raised funds for work that led to ongoing friendships with Eleanor Roosevelt and Thurgood Marshall. In 1941, Murray was admitted to Howard University Law School and was the only woman in her class. On her first day, one of her professors announced that he didn't know why a woman would want to attend law school. She termed this type of humiliation Jane Crow and spent much of the rest of her life working to end it. She graduated first in her class at Howard and intended to continue her studies at Harvard University with a fellowship that was traditionally awarded to those who graduated first in class. However, Harvard did not accept women, and Murray was rejected despite a letter of support from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In response, she wrote, "I would gladly change my sex to meet your requirements, but since the way to such change has not been revealed to me, I have no recourse but to appeal to you to change your minds. Are you to tell me that one is as difficult as the other?" It must be noted that in her 20s, Murray had shortened her name from Pauline to the more androgynous Paulie, and is known to have been romantically linked with women during her life. In 2017, Rosalind Rosenberg, in an interview, the author of Jane Crow, The Life of Pauli Murray, categorized Murray as transgender, stating, "These were years when the term transgender did not exist, and there was no social movement to support or help make sense of the trans experience." Murray's papers helped me to understand how her struggle with gender identity shaped her life as a civil rights pioneer, legal scholar, and feminist. Pauli went on to postgraduate law studies at UC Berkeley, was hired as the state's first Black Deputy Attorney General in January 1946, and returned to New York City in 1948. She was hired for legal research by the Women's Division of the Methodist Church, which was opposed to segregation. And that work eventually became the 746-page book, States' Laws on Race and Color, published in 1950. Thurgood Marshall, then the NAACP chief counsel and future Supreme Court justice, called the book the Bible of the Civil Rights Movement. Her work drew on psychological, sociological, as well as legal arguments, an innovative technique for which she had previously been criticized by her Howard professors. Her approach was influential to the successful NAACP arguments to the U.S. Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. In 1961, Murray began additional studies at Yale Law, and that same year, the U.S. President John F. Kennedy appointed her to the Presidential Commission on the Status of Women. In a 1963 letter to civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph, she criticized the fact that during the March on Washington, no women were invited to make one of the major speeches or to be part of its White House delegation of leaders. She wrote, "I have been increasingly perturbed over the blatant disparity between the major role which Negro women have played and are playing in the crucial grassroots levels of our struggle, and the minor role of leadership they have been assigned in the national policy-making decisions. It is indefensible to call a national march on Washington and send out a call which contains the name of not a single woman leader." 2 years later, she became the first African American to receive a doctorate of the science of law from Yale. In the following year, she co-founded the National Organization for Women, and she and Dorothy Kenyon successfully argued a case in which the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled that women have an equal right to serve on juries. When the lawyer and future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote her brief for a 1971 Supreme Court case, Reed versus Reed, that extended the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause to women for the first time, she added Murray and Kenyon as co-authors in recognition of her debt to their work. At more than 60 years of age, Murray left the law and academia to attend the seminary. She was ordained to the diaconate in 1976, became the first African-American woman ordained as an Episcopal priest the next year, and was among the first generation of Episcopal women priests. On Mother's Day, 1978, she preached in her hometown of Durham, North Carolina, at St. Philip's Episcopal Church, where her mother and grandparents had attended in the 19th century. For the next 7 years, Murray worked in a parish in Washington, D.C., focusing particularly on ministry to the sick. On July 1st, 1985, Pauley Murray died of pancreatic cancer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Since her death, the General Convention of the Episcopal Church voted to honor Murray in 2012 as one of its holy women, holy men. And in 2018, Murray was made a permanent part of the Episcopal Church's calendar of saints. Bishop Michael Curry, the current and first African-American presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, said this recognition honors people whose lives have exemplified what it means to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and make a difference in the world.